It is the Anfield Wrap. The Anfield Wrap after Liverpool have won by 2-1. It did not stir the soul. It did not excite the spirit. It did not add to the sheer joy of Christmas. And yet it means that Liverpool have won 4 and drawn 2 of the last 6 league games. It means they've got a gap to 4th place. It means lots and lots of positive things. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about how they didn't finish the game very, very well. We'll get out of our own bubble a little bit. We're going to bang on about Florian Wirtz and more. And we will get on to transfers. I've got Mr. Gutmann with me. I've got Beth Lindop. I've got Cam Rimmer. All here together. And we are in association with Peloton. As ever, second year of being partnered with Peloton. We like them a great deal. And there's going to be a competition that is running in January. So if you become part of the Anfield Wraps team on there, you'll be able to be part of that competition. And that should be all very, very good indeed. Peloton are also Liverpool's cardio and strength partner. There is a cross-training series, and there's also Peloton IQ, which is your virtual personal trainer, which will help you reach your fitness goals. Don't get all January about the whole thing. Do it because you want to do it.
Is it for life?
Yeah, no, it is. I think it is. And I think also in general, people need to, as I said before Christmas, do Christmas the way you need to do Christmas. Do New Year the way you need to do New Year, and just make sure that you're conscious of the way in which it is. So yes, join the Anfield Wrap.
Ruining your body.
Sorry?
You need to get it right again.
You need to get it right again. But do what's right for you. Exactly. The Anfield Wrap team on there, you can get all sorts of LFC prizes. That's to come. More details on that next week. And also we've got our live shows. If you go to theanfieldwrap.com/TAW live, you can see where we're going to be. It is Ireland, the island of Ireland, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday before the Manchester City game. Those shows are going to sell out this week. So if you do want to come to that, Dublin already has, and the rest will be selling out this week for certain. And then Australia, which is also selling pretty quickly. That's around the March international break after the Brighton game, around the 20th of March onwards, where we are going to Australia and New Zealand, Auckland thrown in there as well, along with Sydney, Melbourne, I should know all this off the top of my head, Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth and Auckland. Well done, Neil. Beth, Liverpool 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. It's another game of 2 halves. Let's just start with the first, because first and foremost it's more fun. 2-0 at half-time just sort of flattered Wolves, 2 goals, 2 woodwork moments from Liverpool, and Wolves just sort of had no answers. Liverpool were much the better side.
Yeah, I thought Liverpool played fairly well. I mean, you know, you can argue they maybe didn't start the game super quickly, but they didn't necessarily need to. I think they controlled the game. I think they had the perfect balance between sort of control and, you know, having a few dangerous attacks. Like you say, they were unlucky. That Ekitike one that comes off the outside of the post was that would have been a great goal had that gone in. And then, yeah, both goals just really well worked and came from a moment of just sort of an injection of pace or ingenuity. And like you say, I think 2-0 at half-time was the sort of performance and the sort of scoreline that we wanted from Liverpool this season. But they have been the masters at offering encouragement at 2-0 up this season. In a way that I don't think any football team ever has done it in such a gratuitous way. So yeah, second half was frustrating, but first half I thought was positive.
Quickening pace, I think, was the key part of how Liverpool were able to attack in the first half, Cam. You got to see it right the way across the pitch, Wirtz with the sheer quality and that shift on tempo. Both fullbacks, I think, offered quickening pace at different stages in there as well. Jones, again, tempo and happy to sort of surge past someone. And Ekitike. All of those players just offered Liverpool the ability to be able to say to Wolves, you think you were playing at this speed? No, it's this speed. And that's where the chances came from. And eventually it's where the goals came from.
Yeah, well, you know, with Wirtz's goal, it's kind of first half, people were like around by me getting a bit frustrated. I was just a bit slow and like predictable side to side and stuff. And then kind of Ekitike, as you just said, he kind of just went, well, no, I'm just going to turn the game on its head now. And just turned like that. And even though the last few weeks, it's just been back to basics, there's still them signs, isn't it, where we can just turn on its head like that. There was never really a time where 0-0 was thinking, oh, it's going to be one of them days again. I think everyone kind of knew the goal was coming. We just all had to wait a bit. And I think that is what the team are going through at the minute anyway. It's just kind of a building process. We're going through games and we're just going through it all together. But yeah, the pace is frightening that we've got there, and it's only just starting.
I like the idea of Cam there with the goal was coming. I thought the goal was coming as well. It comes late in the half. I was actually quite surprised when I look back post-match, if you know what I mean, that it was as close to the break as it was. Because to me, I was just sort of thinking, we're going to score here before half-time. I'd been worried that it was going to be a frustrating first half. I'd been worried that Wolves would turn up, back 5, 3 very aggressive midfielders in front, Rob, and we maybe look a little blunt going into the first half period and maybe need to sort it out, find a bit of space second. Instead, I just thought it felt very Liverpool are the better side. The goal will come from the better side.
Yeah, I'm not sure I was that confident it was coming first half. I think I thought it would take the Kop end. It would take, and I could see us doing 1-0 on 65 and maybe getting one late on, and that's what we'd be happy to deal on. So it was almost a pleasant surprise, I think, when the goal came along. And I know we'd rattled their woodwork twice, hadn't we? Ekitike and the McAllister's shot. But it had been, they would have said, I think, on 30 up to 35, that their low block was an effective obstruction to Liverpool's ambitions. It took a moment of true explosiveness. I mean, I suppose you look, the Vert's pass to Ekitike is the highlight of the entire first half, and it almost exists as its own thing.
Possibly of our lives.
It was Dalglish to Rush. Every old timer at that moment went, that's Kenny, that's Rushy. You had to think and be saying that. But that sort of that gem aside, it took a bit of explosiveness that Jeremy Frimpong brought us down the right. I thought it was a salutary reminder that the way you break down low blocks best, unless you get lucky or get a set piece, is really if you can properly get in behind a team and you can play in that space, just a yard in from the byline, and look to get cutbacks. Frimpong does more than can be asked of him, really. Because usually the cutback is a percentage pass. It looked to me for all the world like he'd seen Gravenberch out the corner of his eyes and he meant for it to land.
I think he knew where he was putting it.
Yeah, it was a lot of the time you go, just put it into the space and you rely on the runners and to win the percentages, chance that your guy finds the ball. So it was exceptional by Frimpong, and it was, I mean, I've always thought the way to do it is you play 1-2 combinations to do that. Frimpong just did it through sheer explosiveness, which was wonderful to see. And he unlocked the door. I think it was so close to half time that I think I got out of my seat and thought, wow, there won't be anything more happening before half time. I'll go to the toilet and then pop down for my half time pint. And as I was on the stairwell, there was a roar and Florian had scored. So we were able to, that was such a nice thing to do. It's a long time since I've sort of missed a goal because it's just about to be half time. It felt a very long time since we scored one on 44. But, that's all you could have wanted from that first half, really.
But they went pop, which I think is a big deal, Beth. It's what you wanted them to do at the point at which this is not a confident Wolves side. If there's a bit of a funny, and it can sound like a churlish criticism, it's that they didn't find the third.
Yeah.
Almost, Wolves were in a huddle after the second goal was in, and that's that way of our backs are against the wall now. And I think that's always a telling moment when you see a side go into a huddle. But Liverpool go one, go two, and I think that is something that you want to see, especially against the sort of side that has picked, let's be clear about this, 8 really defensively minded players. To do that's really important.
Yeah, and I think Liverpool at that moment and the crowd at that moment sensed that Wolves were there for the taking, and I think it was nice to see that really quickly going from 1 to 2. I think the probably one of the biggest criticisms you can level at Liverpool this season is that they haven't often enough sort of really gone for the jugular and made it 2 to 3. That has probably been, and I'm sure the manager's probably biggest frustration is that they've not done that, because you get a third goal and the complexion of a game changes instantly, and it's so it's not easy, but it's easier to see it then go into 4 to 5, which I think at half time everyone probably would have said this is probably going to be a 4 or a 5-0, and it should have been. And I think obviously we'll get on to the second half in a moment, but I think it had that set piece just been defended a little bit better, I think it probably does go to 3 at some point, and then it goes to 4 and it goes to 5, and we're having a very different conversation. But as it is, Liverpool just aren't good enough at the moment at really capitalising on that dominance and making that jump from 2 to 3.
Interesting couple of things in the shape, Cam, I thought. One was that he started Chiesa, but he uses him very much wide right. When I say wide right, he loads of license to drift, which helps create space, I think. But he uses him that side. He also uses McAllister most advanced on that side as well. He almost had that as a little bit of a 2. Jones keeping this role whilst he doesn't have Szoboszlai. Jones keeping this role really as the player who moves midfield around, which was McAllister's role last season, and I think has been McAllister's role quite consistently since he's been at Liverpool, with the exception of when Jurgen used him deepest. I think it's quite telling there as to, his choices that he's made, because while he didn't have that many choices in terms of what his 11 would be because of the fitness issues, there were 2 or 3 different ways he could have set them up, and he chose that one.
Yeah, and you've got to give him credit for it. It shows, people saying he doesn't really know his best team or what his best thing is, but you know, with the whole, when you're saying there, like he's putting a lot of emphasis on the right, it's for life after Salah's life, you know, during AFCON while he's away, and it's all these different options, because I think a lot of the time we were kind of predicting what the team was going to be, or how it would look, and as you said, there was a few different surprises there and a few changes, and I thought it looked quite good at times, to be honest. You know, it wasn't the best performance, but yeah, I noticed that with McAllister that he was playing a lot more different to how he has played, but I think, as you said, Jones carrying on this role that he's been doing was one of the more telling parts of the game.
I think it is telling. I think what's really interesting is you look at the average positions, Rob, and you look with the evidence you don't as the game was wearing on. Jones plays close to Wirtz. Yeah. I think this has become, maybe whilst he's picking Wirtz and he's got Wirtz on this run, I think it's a bit of an article of faith for the manager now. Jones plays close to Wirtz, so Jones holds the left-hand side, Wirtz comes off the far left-hand side to create the space. The two of them play in their own little channel, and it almost felt like the rest was a little bit almost make do amend. Well, I'll worry about the rest of it later, but if I can get Curtis Jones to I can't believe, we'll come on to talk about him more, but I think one of the oddest things in a way of Wirtz's genius is how much he gets the ball, how much he's on the ball all the time. Curtis helps with that massively, and I thought, again, first half in particular, those two being close together was really important for Liverpool.
The greats get on the ball. It's an underrated stat for me, is involvement in a football match. Sometimes touches on the ball.
Most players aren't. I mean, most there's the old classic Zidane film which follows him for 90 minutes. And when Zidane watched it back afterwards, he said, what surprised you? And Zidane said, I rarely have got the ball. You know, and that's Zidane, for God's sake.
but you know, the great, I mean, Zidane's a great, so maybe disproving my theory.
No.
But I grew up watching Kenny Dalglish, referencing him again. He was omnipresent. Liverpool looked for him from every situation. Like when there was a throw-in, it was Kenny would scuttle over to be within range of the receiving of the throw-in. Every situation, every restart, it was where was Dalglish on the pitch. I think we saw that with Gerrard. I think Gerrard just made sure he took every ball that was available. You know, his personality demanded the ball all the time. Suarez to agree. But I think, Wirtz's position was fascinating me. At times I was going, stop being so left. But then you looked at his two most noteworthy interventions, certainly in the first half, were the pass to Ekitike. He's in a right-sided position when he makes that pass, central right-sided position, and when he makes the run to score his goal, he diagonally runs across to the right to do it. But it wasn't just out of possession, though, that he was adopting quite an orthodox left-sided attacking role. He was very often there. But there was that dovetailing with Jones, you're right, because I think Jones is also a tucked-in left-sided attacking player by upbringing. So I think it works. I'm not saying they're the same player, but they're very, very similar set of disciplines and approaches to the match. So that made a big, big difference to us, I thought. I think I was answering the question comprehensively.
I'll come back. I want to come back onto it and talk about it more in a little while. I want to talk about the second half, though, Cam. They finished the game poorly. They look a combination of tired and done in. By the end, I want to be clear, there's being leggy in a football match, and then there's watching both Ekitike and Wirtz very visibly have cramp. I felt like Kirkes had cramp as well as the game was finishing. It's another goal conceded from a set piece. I just want to park that bit, though. The goals conceded. The goals conceded on 52. Two things are striking. One, Liverpool look absolutely done in. But two, Wolves don't actually have that many shots. They actually don't have that many chances. Yeah. When you look back at the game in the cold light of day, it's not as though the goalkeeper's making save after save after save to keep Liverpool in it. So it's this odd thing, isn't it, really, where they did look to me as though they were very much second best, but they weren't being absolutely battered and pulled from pillar to post. No,
it's so easy to lose your head in the ground and be like, oh my God, it's coming, it's coming. But when you watch it back, it wasn't really, I don't think they were ever going to score. Like, it never really felt it's going to finish 2-2 here. But at the same time, it was just a really weird last 10-15. It wasn't, we were battling, but at the same time, we were just giving the ball back to them, but they weren't doing anything with it. It was just all a bit, it was all just a bit of a weird last 5-10. And I think it's just, it's a combination of a lot of things, to be honest. I think there's a lot of players who are being asked to do a lot more minutes than I think they thought they were going to be doing. And there's some who were just shattered and there's no one else to play in front of them. So it's just kind of, we just need to get through this period. But like I said, if the game had carried on for another couple of hours, I don't think Wolves are going to score again. Is that down to us, or is that down to Wolves not being that good? Only time will tell, really. But, it was similar when we played them at home last season, when we were going for the league, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it was a very similar sort of end of the game, wasn't it? Where,
Oh, we all came out like, oh my God, what was that for the last half an
yeah,
hour?
but because we were top of the league, it was champions performance, whereas with this one, it's like, oh, they're looking a bit leggy and stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, the way it's going and the journey we're on, we might probably look back at this sort of game and be like, that was probably the start of like a building block. They're the sort of games where you've just got to win. It doesn't look pretty, but that's it. Get the 3 points and move.
I never thought coming into this one that we would have a stroll in the park because you know, when I was listening to the pre-match warm-up show and it sort of brought home, nobody actually picked a team at the end of that show. You all were taken around the table, I think, and nobody quite was able to pick a team because there were so many unknowns. Going to the ground on the day, I was thinking, out of Ramsey, Naoni, Engamoa, I could see at least one, possibly two starting. We weren't sure of the fitness updates on certain players. So we thought even if Frimpong is deemed fit enough to start, and all the speculation was that he wouldn't be, he's not going to be able to finish the game. Bradley and Gakpo were being talked about coming back into the squad as only being a 50-50 chance, so they were never going to start. There's a lot of football. There's players like Wirtz and Ekatiko who haven't been able to finish football matches. McAllister, who still feels like he's finding fitness. So you looked at that all the way through. Oh, Konate had missed training, by the way. So all the way through, you thought, if we could get, I was saying to myself, any way of getting through this game will be a real decent achievement. I don't care how crap Wolves are. Any low block team can make it hard. You've got to be at your best to unpick a low block, quite frankly. And it's credit to us that we did it whilst we still had legs. And I think that's the thing we have to take. I think if I want to be entirely a positivist about it, but I don't think I'm that miles wrong, is that was a game we had to win within 60 minutes, quite frankly, because the legs were going to fall off. The cramp was going to happen. Players were going to have to be replaced by inferior players, quite frankly, or players who weren't quite ready. So the punish that we got two when we had the energy, and we only conceded one when we didn't, is no bad thing. And I kind of think that's how the manager will look at it. It was what it was. We didn't love it. We wanted 4-0, but I was taking that all day long.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, you looked at the bench before kick-off and you think, well, there's very few players who can come on and impact this game. And I think, unfortunately, that is where Liverpool are at the moment. That's where, you know, obviously fitness isn't helping. I think Szoboszlai is a huge miss. I think just when we talk about players who can finish games,
there you go, another one
who can be relentless. He is the one, isn't he? He's the one who, you know, if he'd been playing at 80 minutes, if you need Liverpool to burst up the pitch and you know, show a little bit of energy and impetus, then he's the one who's been doing it all season. So I think he was a massive miss, and obviously he'll be, you know, it'll be a boost to have him back on Thursday. But I think that the one thing that does worry me is the squad at the moment. I don't necessarily see how that gets an awful lot better without a signing or two. And listen, you know, Liverpool will make that decision. I know obviously Salah will come back in January. And you know, Gakpo's getting back to fitness, and there's players who are getting back to fitness, but I still think the squad looks light. And I think, you know, if they don't buy someone, we could be in for a few more games like that this season.
The thing I would say, Beth, is, and listen, there's reasons for this that go beyond the manager, full stop, the manager in this game, the players in this game. But it's hard to watch a football team, and, you know, I completely accept Rob's points. I think it was always going to be, in a way, almost a 2-0 at half-time, and the way the first half ended up going, maybe it made you feel a little bit more secure, maybe if you move the goals around a little bit, etc. But there's got to be a way to carry some threat.
Yeah.
Or there's got to be a way to keep the ball a little bit. And Liverpool
Do you not think we carried threat, though, in the second half? I think we did.
I don't think we're carrying any threat last 20.
Maybe not last 20. Maybe
I'm thinking about last 20. Sorry, I want to be clear.
I think the only clear chance that I remember in the second half was the Wirtz to Gravenberch, and he puts it over.
Slight,
yeah,
yes.
I think beyond that, I can't think.
Gakpo has an interesting quasi-chance.
He sort of does, but he sort of thrashes at it, and you'd probably rather he goes to the corner at that point, ironically. It's that late.
Yes.
But that's what I think is hard to watch, Beth, is that you've got to, you know, if the scoreboard's against you, which it sort of is a 2-1, i.e. there's something for Wolves to get after, if you can't keep it, which they just didn't seem capable of doing, you have to find a way to carry. There's got to be the carrying of some threat, and that, I think, is what makes the last 15-20 feel more of an emotional thing, because there's just literally nothing really for any length of time that turns we're under pressure, tap off, and they're going to have to get an answer to that somewhere, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest frustration for me was they just weren't keeping the ball. And I agree, you've got to sort of decide, well, do we want to go for a third here or do we want to just manage it? And they didn't do either. And that was the frustrating thing. I think that was me. That's how frustrated I am by it.
Fuming.
But yeah, I think that just that inability to string more than 3 passes together, and listen, whether that's tiredness or whatever, but I think, you know, you want them to just take the sting out of it a little bit. And listen, like we say, it's one of those, you look back in hindsight and the only real clear chance, well, there's 2, isn't there? There's the Conor Bradley tackle, which was brilliant. And then the header that gets put over the bar. Those are the only 2 real clear Wolves chances that I remember. So it wasn't, like you say, that Alisson was having to come up with loads of saves, but just that inability to just, like you say, release that pressure a little bit was really frustrating.
Do you know what's just occurring to me? Because there's a commonality between what we were really terrified with in the last 10 at Tottenham and what we're describing a little bit about Wolves. And maybe sort of encapsulated in that Gakpo wild thrash rather than going to the corner. I wonder, with Leeds away, we started keeping the ball in the corner far too early, didn't we?
Yes.
And then that impact. I wonder after that, if the manager had said, if we find there's a goal in it late on, the best way you're defending this is to take risks, be brave, and to go forward. And I think that's possibly why we may have given the ball away more than we would have expected. Just a theory that's occurred to me in this moment.
That's all right. It's a perfectly valid one. I think the problem is, Cam, I don't see them getting fitter. So for whatever reason, they're not fit enough. Pre-season wasn't right, and we know that there's a massive reason why pre-season was hard. Or, you know, the players themselves didn't get themselves into decent enough condition. There's a couple that's around where, because of they hadn't had a competitive game for as long as they had, that's a situation as well. A couple got injuries in what I call the long pre-season, which is when you're playing a game a week in August but conditioning still going on. A few got injuries around then, and Liverpool were under a bit of stress then. So there's loads of reasons up before you'd even get to, well, were they well enough trained, frankly. My concern at the minute is they're not going to get any fitter. They've just had a week between games twice. They end up where they end up in that one. What they will do, hopefully, is at least get some numbers off the substitutes bench that the manager wants to use. Because I think at the minute, what I think is hard for the manager is he can't manage his subs. You look at Emery, Villa at the weekend, he's in complete control of his starting 11 and being able to make 3, 4, 5 changes that he wants to make over the course of the game. It feels to me as though Schlott all but needs to be forced to make a substitution because of the quality of players that he's got on the pitch and what he's got on the bench, and Liverpool could just do with getting him another couple of options at least for the bench to come back as soon as possible.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that in terms of like a few players getting knocks at the start of the season. I don't think I think players have all been different levels of fitness. There's never been a time where there's been, right, there's your 11 fittest. There's always been one who's just coming back from injury. Yeah. One who gets it, like, there's never been where it's like, right. And, you know, I think the season...
I've got 15 and they're all about the same
and
level.
I think the season literally shows that we come out fighting and then we literally just go and lose what felt like forever. And, you know, and I think where it is, I think with Slot, obviously he's getting a lot of stick throughout the season now, but I do think in terms, like, you know, last season he just had his 13, I was like, right, this is who I'm going with, this is it. He's come in this season with all these new signings, all a few coming back in and out at the same time, or at different times even. And yeah, he just needs to get a couple of them on the bench, because you are looking at the bench and it's like, it's not so much what would you do, like, it's like, you know, Slot doesn't really trust them to come on and do the job.
And you don't want to bring 17-year-olds on into horrible situations. You don't want to bring 17-year-olds on into desperation.
That was one of the lads by me was saying, "Oh, bring Rio," and it's like, well, no, like, he's got the most minutes of a 17-year-old, like ever or something in the Premier League, and he can't be getting brought on when the game's reality, there's tackles flying, and you want to, where you can bring him on when it's 3-4-0 up. Then that's not the environment for a sort of kid like that. And yeah,
unless it's last minute in Newcastle.
Or that, you know, just Monday night,
yeah, apart from that one.
Yeah, but no, I think once he does get a couple of them back, you may start to see a bit of a less hectic 15-20 than we did the other day.
Getting out of our own bubble is important. How much football did you watch over the weekend? It's all right if not much.
I kept abreast of it, but I just watched highlights of bits and pieces of the Leeds.
How much did you see?
Hasn't been many thrillers, have there?
What
a bit of a slog.
What there's been is every game, no one's entered the game strongly.
Yeah.
Every game has either been a draw or there's been one goal in it. And they've all been, I'm including Arsenal in this, Arsenal, Brighton's XG on when it goes 2-0 is 0.1. By the time the final whistle goes, it's 0.7. Now, that's not, not as much as Wolves created, but it's still a fair bit, but comparatively to where Arsenal are and how Arsenal defend. And they barely complete a pass, last 20 minutes Arsenal. And they're shattered. And I'm just looking at this, Beth, City end okay against Forest, but Forest are knackered as well. That only ends 2-1. Chelsea are a disgrace, second half against Villa. I mean, but Villa didn't muster a shot first half against Chelsea. So my point here is that no one's putting a 90-minute performance in. Brentford beat Bournemouth 4-1. Brentford went 3-0 up and Bournemouth had 14 shots immediately thereafter. I just did Billy Grant for Friday show talking about that game. And he said, first half it was all really relaxed. I think these are great. He said, second half it didn't half get nervy. And you think, you want to win 4-1?
Yeah.
This league at the minute it's so hard. It's so hard for everyone. Every single match feels as though everyone's pulling it out until the very end, and
it's horrible as much as hard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just there's no joy in it.
No, there's no relaxation in it, and that's every game apart from that Brentford Bournemouth one is either one goal in it at the end, so the injury time board goes up, and the result still in doubt in all of those matches. And I just think that it is at the minute so much toil. Only 4 sides have won more than half the games. The games are really hard.
They are, and listen, the manager, as Cam said, he's come in for a lot of criticism, and I've taken a fair bit of stick this season because I've been quite defensive of the manager. Not defensive, but I think there's mitigation, and I think it's totally fine, totally valid to have been concerned by him, by some of his decisions that he's made this season. I think maybe some of the criticism has been a little bit personal. I think some of it has been maybe rooted in the fact that people still aren't quite over Klopp going, and it's, to me, sometimes from some of there's a little bit of a revisionism around sort of some of the periods of Klopp's reign. And listen, that's not me trying to play that down, because we all know how incredible Klopp's tenure was, and I think he was an incredible manager, but he had games and he had periods where
he would say himself he wasn't always brilliant at his job.
Yeah, and if you go back to that Leicester game, that was a Boxing Day game, wasn't it? Or around the period a couple of years ago when it took 2 own goals from Wout Faes to win that game. Or even in the title winning season, that there were games, the Sheffield United one away from home, Sheffield United were terrible, and it took Gini Wijnaldum's goal squaring under the goalkeeper to go in. So
hanging on at the end, they have a couple of chances first half, and they have a couple of chances late in that game.
So you do have periods like this in any manager's reign, and that's not me saying that absolves Slot of any responsibility for Liverpool being poor this season, because I'm not saying that. But I just think there's maybe it's been a little bit harsh at times, I have felt. And you have to look at this Wolves team and say, that they are terrible. They may be on course to be the worst ever Premier League side, but they were also minutes away from getting a result at Arsenal a couple of weeks ago. Yep. They did get a result at Tottenham. As much as they've been terrible, they've not really been battered that much this season.
No, they've only been battered once.
So, they are still a Premier League team. They can still make life difficult for you. And
Brazilian internationals in the centre of midfield.
Yeah, and I think some people feel like Liverpool have a divine right to go and beat everyone 5-0 because they're the champions and because they've spent so much money, but that's just not how it works all the time, and that's frustrating. And we'd all sat here love Liverpool to be going winning 5-0 every week and like them to be playing better than they are, absolutely, but it just doesn't always quite work like that.
All right, I want to talk about Florian Wirtz because I'm simple, and I loved that first 45 minutes. Rob was saying before about the greats, and I think playing the position that he's been given license to play, the license he has to play the way he plays, Camp, does mean he does need to make sure he is getting himself on the ball on a regular basis. But Wolves are playing a back five. They're playing 3 defensive midfielders in front of that back five. And yet, first half, you couldn't keep Florian Wirtz out the action. He was just on the ball, on the ball, on the ball. He makes playing a simple 15, 20-yard ball look sumptuous. And then when he does magical things, my God, they're so magical.
Yeah, I think it's with him this season. I think looking back now, you're thinking, is he a level above? Is he quicker on the pitch than the rest of the players? You think of that flick to Salah at Chelsea. Mohamed Salah, one of our greats, wasn't even onto it as quick as he was. And I felt like the Wolves game the other day, that was kind of like a coming of age performance. Like he just seemed bigger on the pitch, if you know what I mean. He was strutting about more, and it wasn't even just like the little neat passes that he's doing like 34-yard passes across the pitch. And what was striking was every single player was just looking to give the ball to him. Like you said before, all the greats always getting on the ball. We're always looking, when you say before, where's Dalglish, give the ball to Kenny and stuff. Every single player was looking to get the ball to Wirtz. But I feel like him and Jones have built up this partnership over the last few weeks, which nobody's probably seen coming, to be honest. And I think Wirtz, when he was last on international break, was saying about Jones is one of the favourite players he likes playing with. And you can see the little partnerships that are happening, but that pass he did through to Ekitike was just one of the best passes I think I've seen at Anfield. It was unbelievable. It was just to perfection. It was just glided on the floor, and he's one of them players who you look forward to going to watch every week, and he's worth the admission money, gets you up off your seat. But when you watch him though, like I can't really lay a finger on who he reminds me of. He's like a mixture of all like loads and loads of players from in the past. I was thinking of, he's got a bit of Coutinho about him. He's got a bit of everything, and he's just he's not bad.
I mean, we talked about he's got a bit of Dalglish because he's got that sort of that pass, that perfect way of playing the old-fashioned way of playing the number 10. For me, again, it's a bit of an old reference, but he's got a bit of Peter Beardsley in as much as that he's an exceptional one-touch footballer, and we all admire the 40-yard ball to Ekitike, or a dribble, or a cross-field pass, or what have you. But his one-touch play is just unbelievable. Yeah. Just keeps you moving and keeps you moving. I almost enjoy that the most because he lays it off over 5-6 yards with a perfect weight to that. And what they used to say, the instructions are on the ball, and he moves to receive it again. What I've liked as well, I've noticed in the last few games, the dribble is coming. Now, you didn't see that in the first 10, 12 games. I think you saw the one that brings the goal against Sunderland. He was a little drop and jink and shot that deflected in. I think we saw one or two in the last couple of games, but there's that delicious one in the second half on Saturday, wasn't it, where he, as you said, he put it not on a plate, but a reasonable chance for Gakpo. And that's interesting. You see, that's a sign of confidence coming. I think a player who's finding his way, doesn't quite trust his body in a new league, is not going to make a fool of himself and try and plough through three lads. When you feel that, you can see that what he must be feeling, think, okay, these aren't so good. I can go at these, I can get at these. And I think we're close to seeing him score from a dribble, and I think that'll take him up another level.
So much of it is close to touchlines or bylines. And that's the point, the bit where you're trying to shepherd you. Sides are trying to shepherd a player into those areas because they go, well, what are you going to do? Worst case scenario here is that you get a throw. We're going to go from there. Could be a goal kick, could be a corner. Okay, we'll accept. Could be a corner because, no. Repeatedly around those areas of the pitch, Beth, in ways that are almost sorcerer-like, mesmerising. Liverpool, at the very least, come out with the ball moving forward, or he comes out with the ball moving towards goal, and you saw it time and again over the course of that game. Yeah,
and like Cam said, I think he's the shining light at the minute. He is the player that you just he gets you out your seat, and Liverpool haven't necessarily been the most enjoyable watch over the past couple of months, but I think he, as an individual, is someone who, even when Liverpool haven't necessarily been playing well or haven't been getting the results, he's been enjoyable to watch. And I think anyone who's, it's been so easy to level criticism at him and say, oh, well, he's not got the goals or the assists, but I think anyone who has watched Liverpool this season would say that he's slowly but surely just been getting better and better. And I think that, we saw that on Saturday, and I think you could tell by, I think it's, been played down by him, by the manager, about this sort of the weight of not getting a goal and stuff, but I think you could just tell by the celebration how much it meant to him, how much it meant to his teammates.
That was the one for me. That tells me how much it means to him, if you know what I mean. They know what it was.
They know that he's been getting so much stick, and they know that the pressure that he's been under, and I just, it's been a long time since I've seen everyone sort of be so delighted for a goal scorer. So I think, they know that he's maybe not got the numbers that his performances have deserved. And I think as well, what really pleased me on Saturday was there was one point he lost the ball in the first half, or that might be in the second half, I can't remember. And he chased it, he sprinted 20 yards, and he was to put pressure on to try and win it back, and I think he did. And
he stopped losing the ball, by the way. Do you remember in the early games how he'd lose the ball quite a few times?
And listen, he's the sort of player, he will lose the ball because he
tries things.
He tries things, and that's the it's risk and reward, isn't it? You know, those sorts of players, they will lose the ball from time to time. But so my piece after the game was on him, and I was like looking at his numbers, and I think he had 104 touches. And when I first saw that, I thought, is that right? 104 touches. You know, it's quite rare that a player who is more of an attacking player gets that many. And yeah, just the fact he's constantly looking for the ball. He's a second quicker than everyone else in his mind, and that's translating to his feet now as well.
He's exciting because you constantly, like I found what he did away into Milan when he came off the bench in a Champions League game to just be, you know, immediately overwhelming. That level of looking like the most sophisticated footballer on the pitch, A, as a substitute, but also B, at the level of the game, that you put one team away and he looked like that, and you're like, imagine what he's capable of. Now this is the worst team in the country, worst team in the division that he's done this against. But in a way, I'm made up with that as well, because part of what you want Florian Wirtz for is to have your pathway to saying, well, this is how we put teams to the sword. This is how, you know, sides do come to Anfield, and before they know where they are, they're 3-0 down, because we're capable of this, this and this. Now, it doesn't quite go to plan there in this one, but one of the things that you are getting to see, I think, is the future of this team. He's part of that. There's other players I want to talk about, Kerkez, Frimpong, Ekitike, Jones. These are all footballers you can quite easily see being key players for Liverpool across the next 5 years. And I think Wirtz is at the vanguard of that. He's leading this idea of this is what this team's going to look like.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, coming out the grounds, that first half was probably his best 45 he's had for us, and you just knew people were going to say, oh, well, you know, it was bottom of the league. But sometimes players in the past for us have looked better because the teams have just been crap, really. But with Wirtz, you can just tell that's not the case here. He was like he was a good few levels above the rest of the pitch, and yeah, I think he'll be a mainstay, and I think the team's going to be built around him. You can see it now. Every ball's into him. The whole shape is just built around him, and yeah, I just can't wait to watch him play for years to come. But them lads you've just mentioned then as well, no, they're all under the age of what, 24, 25?
Yeah.
And you can easily see where that's like the mainstay of our team now for the next 4 or 5 seasons, and he'll be in good hands, and it's only the early days as well.
Yeah, I think getting one of the reasons I think why people took the second half as badly as they did against Wolves was because the first half really did feel as though it pointed away. There was things happening that you were like, I'd like seeing that happen on a football pitch. I want Kerkez to be up there, thank you very much. You mentioned before about Frimpong being explosive. I want that. That is a fantastic thing to see. I've missed that. I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
That's great. The fact that Ekitike, to me, is so involved in the game without scoring in the first half. He's so involved. That is what I want from a Liverpool centre-forward. Jones being just seeing everything, finding everyone, constantly keeping the game moving. I want that. And it was only against Wolves, but I genuinely was sort of thinking to myself at half-time, sort of settling down, this is the direction of travel, and that to me is exciting. It is good to see.
Yeah, the things that left you with a sort of sense that it could have been a better day coming out of it, aside from the obviousness that the scoreline was tight, were, for me, more than anything, was seeing players struggling. And I know we're going back to this thing, seeing players struggling with cramp and fitness. And I thought, we've got three of the star performers today, or 3 or even 4 if you could, Frimpong, Kerkez, but especially Wirtz and Ekitike, looking like we were within minutes of playing them into a hamstring or groin strain injury, and without really the options to be able to take them off. I was sitting there screaming, the manager could just bring anyone on, I don't care. I don't want Florian Wirtz out for 5 games. I don't want to see Ekitike not being able to line up against Leeds. So that aspect of it, having that starkly put in front of us, I thought was hard to take and worrying. Maybe we'll get past it, and I'm going back on the subject matter. The nature of the way the goal was conceded, given everything the manager had said beforehand and has been saying week in, week out about the negative set-piece balance, it's just got to stop, really. Maybe it's one of those things, a bit like when Arsenal scored 9 times in 11 games a set-piece and then don't score one for the next 12. It's one of them, you know, there'll be a reversion to the mean somewhere along the line. And maybe, the manager points out we weren't doing anything different last season, and we had a positive set-piece balance. So maybe this is just a phase. Ian Graham's very good on football statistics on this in his book about how to win the Premier League. He talks about when people go, there's more goals this season than there's been over the last 2 seasons, there's been for the last 20 years. He goes, well, it's bound to be a phase where that happens. And by the next season, there weren't more goals. It wasn't part of a wider trend. It's just something that was happening. And Liverpool may just be being very, very unlucky. And obviously, unluckiness creates a negative cycle because it gets in your head. And every time there's a corner now, the crowd are a little bit anxious.
Yeah.
And of course, even a master in the air like Virgil van Dijk's going to be a little bit more anxious. So it's those things, those continuing themes of the season, the not having fit enough footballers and conceding from set pieces, really. Those are the things that troubled me. As I said, I felt more positive than negative coming out, and not just because of the fact of the 3 points, because I thought it was going to be a tough game and a tough period with limited, relatively stretched resources. And we got through it. I think people should be cheerful. I think we should go into the bounce into the Leeds game full of confidence. And the only things I'm worried about in the Leeds game really are, well, one, they have a bit of a rep from set pieces, as we've seen, and that's not going to help us in our current mindset. And two, I'm not sure, although we get Dominic Szoboszlai back, we haven't suddenly got a raft of players coming back, although obviously there's a bit more training for some of them like Gakpo and Conor Bradley. But, you know, I think we still come out of that 2-1 against Wolves despite the anxieties of the last 20 minutes, relatively speaking, bouncing into a home fixture against Leeds.
I think the positive is, those players I mentioned before about the age of them, 4 of them are also new signings from this summer.
Yeah.
And that is also a positive. You know, there's been, I think, legitimate, and there can be legitimate criticism of Liverpool in the transfer market, and I mean that in all directions. I mean that in terms of things not done as well in the summer just gone. I think all of that there's legitimate criticism that can be made, but all 4 of those players showed the worth, showed the value. But I'll say again, also just showed there's a way Liverpool may well want to do this. For me, it was it's ironic to say in the absence of Salah, for me it was one of the performances that was most reminiscent of pre-season, when you could see how Frimpong, Salah and Szoboszlai wasn't there either, but how Frimpong, Salah and Szoboszlai could be quite a dangerous little triangle. You could see how Vert pulls to the left into this number 10. I just thought you got to see this is what this could be. And that was genuinely pleasing in a way that I think so much of the season hasn't been, where it's just felt like we're just surviving minute to minute.
Yeah, I think there has been a real rush to discredit a lot of the new signings. You know, certainly Kerkez and Frimpong, and I think that the Frimpong one is because it kind of stems from people not really knowing why he was bought in the first place, because he isn't a conventional right back, and you know he's maybe not the winger that we're used to, and so everyone's a little bit like, well, why is he here? And obviously he's had terrible luck with injuries, and I think he's taken a lot of stick the past few weeks about, you know, well, why, he was just a waste of money. Why have you, you know, why has anyone bought him? And you see on Saturday quite clearly that he can have a role to play in this team, whether that be at right back, whether that be further forward. And Kerkez has been the scapegoat, hasn't he, this season? And he's struggled at times, but I don't think his performances have warranted anywhere near the level of sustained criticism that he's had. I thought he was good again. He's still got things to learn. He's still a young footballer. He's still raw. He's still maybe got that little gene in him where you always think he could do something stupid.
He headed it on the ground 3 times in a match. I'm
sheer determination, though.
But I'm mostly in favour of it because it was absolute. Things haven't gone as I would like here. My last resort is to head it whilst it's on the floor. Let's head it whilst it's on the floor then. And I'm all right with that from time to time.
Crawling like an angry baby.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I've really not enjoyed the criticism of him, because I think, you know, at times when Liverpool have looked like they've really lacked passion and intensity, he has been the one who, God love him, has been trying, has been really, really trying, and I think he will be a great footballer for Liverpool going forwards. I think he will be. He might not be Andy Robertson. There's very few players that are.
Or have ever been in Liverpool's history.
Yeah, and that's what I also think. In a similar way to the manager and the comparisons to Klopp, I think with some of the new signings, there's been like, well, he's not Trent, he's not Robbo, he's not, and they're not. They're different footballers. This is going to be a different Liverpool team, and I think that's been quite hard for some people to reconcile with. This isn't Klopp's team anymore, and nor should it be, because great teams don't last forever. And I think the thing, Liverpool now are in transition. You know, whether you like it or not, they are. That title-winning team has been, for various different reasons, dismantled and isn't the same as it looked a year ago or 2 years ago. And I think, you know, part of the reason Liverpool were able to spend in the way that they did in the summer was because they hadn't done a lot of business in the few transfer windows before that. And I think the knock-on effect is that now it's a half-finished rebuild. You know, they need to, at least to me, they need 2 centre-halves. They need another midfielder at least. They need another forward. You know, it's going to take another 2, maybe 3 transfer windows to get this sort of...
I think it's 6 players.
Yeah.
I think it's 6 players
to get this rebuild kind of complete. But I think you can see that there are 4 or 5 or 6 footballers there who, for the next 5 years, could be really important for Liverpool. And I think that is exciting, but it's not going to come without its frustrations.
I think there's also a distortion on our transfer business in the summer in that we've had suffered two really bad injuries to to the most important player we signed, the most expensive in Alexander Isak, but also in the defensive position, Leone, who looked the part in what we saw of him, we just lost him. It's as though that £30 million was just torn up and thrown in the bin. And Isak, even before this injury that's quasi-ended his season, was working his way up to fitness. So almost like the net spend Liverpool have had available on the pitch.
Frimpong's been out.
Frimpong's has probably been negative versus the players that left, if that makes sense. So I think the rebuild is further along than we thought if we'd had a fully fit Isak and Leone and they maintained fitness, barring the odd niggle here and there. I think we'd see it as a bit further down the line than it feels at the moment. Where we are in the season at the moment, we're in a perfect storm of it feeling utterly needing a significant boost to squad size. I mean, because we have no Isak, we have no Leone, we have no Mohamed Salah at this point, and we've had a few injuries. So we feel incredibly sparse at the moment.
I think it's interesting because it's just, you know, words around, for instance, using words like unconventional, you know, to describe Frimpong. Well, Trent was unconventional. You know, they're just unconventional in hugely different ways. And, you know, Trent could well be maybe week in, week out, the best passer of the ball I've literally ever seen. You know, let's be clear about that. Unconventional, we actually mean absolutely brilliant. For Frimpong, you still need to see more of it. And that's where these players are. I want to mention Ekitike again in amongst all of this, because we're seeing him become the player that he can become for us here through these matches. And again, you know, up and down the country, every team you watch, your centre forward gets subbed 60, 65, 70. Every team takes the centre forward off 65, 70 because there's constant sprints. And we're watching Ekitike, and again, your last defining image of Ekitike is the lad who can't run. Whereas you've got to try to bear in mind the lad who was brilliant for 55 minutes. Yeah. And I think that's what's hard when you're watching them at the minute is you end up so almost like your soul's like all knotted by the end of the game. Whereas you therefore forget the exuberance that they give you. And Ekitike was a great example of it at the weekend. Because I'm like, that lad's got to get fitter. Yeah. Forgetting the fact that he was the lad I was watching charge round the pitch for the first hour.
Yeah, and he will get there. And, you know, it's still in the first couple months of his Liverpool career. And I think with all the others, they've all been in and out the team at different times. They've all had different injuries. And also the kinds of players we've never really seen play for, like, they've never, like, when we first signed, we think, oh, how's this going to fit? Because in our heads, we just have a player as a Liverpool player, or not when we don't actually know what that is sometimes. Because, you know, the game changes, managers change, setups change, personnel change. So, yeah, I think they'll be fine in the end. It's just at the minute.
These signings,
you know, you can see a world where in 3 or 4 years' time, they're all still in, they're all still, you know, we might have won a Champions League with all of these lads there. And yeah, we're just at the minute, because they're all in and out the team at different times. They're all so different footballers. You don't really know what's going on, but last few games you are starting to see what it could be.
The manager it is the cliche metaphor now, first used I think actually by Brendan Rodgers. He is trying to build the plane and fly it at the same time. Yeah. Because you've got to play football matches. You've got to play football matches. At the minute, I think that the manager in the country would most like to be able to say, can we just stop for 4 weeks, is Oliver Glasner. I think right now he is like, oh my God, this is now becoming difficult. And everyone respects Glasner. Everyone can respect the achievements. But Crystal Palace right now are finding football matches difficult to deal with because they just don't stop coming. Yeah. You played loads of them and you're about to play loads of them. And I think it's difficult at the minute for the manager with these players, with our manager, because he's going to have to cobble an 11 together for Leeds. And it may not look like this is the end game of the plan as to what we sign player X or player Y for. This might not be the future for Alexis McAllister. This might not be what we want from this position. But he's got to get an 11 on the pitch for Leeds that can do a job with one eye on an 11 on the pitch for Fulham, because there's only a couple of days in the gap, with one eye on an 11 on the pitch for Arsenal, where the world will be watching and no one wants to get embarrassed. And there's only a couple of days in the gap between that as well. And he needs to put points on the board. So, it becomes difficult, doesn't it? And this is what he's having to do game to game at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a fortnight of 7-day breaks, but they've been...
But then players have come back fit.
Suspension, and we've had players go... I suppose if we're looking to this immediate phase, you've got bonuses in a sense, in that they're coming back fresh, having had a little bit of a breather through injuries in Conor Bradley. It's a fingers crossed situation every week with Conor, but he is technically coming back in a touch fresher than those who've played every week. Frimpong, who we've referenced. Gakpo has had a breather. Even Dom Szoboszlai, who's played 3 seasons worth in 1/2 season, will have had 2 weeks off because of the suspension, or best part of 2 weeks off. So in a sense, we can bring some freshness to the situation versus Leeds. So, and interestingly, Andy Robertson, the trust in Kirk has grown so much that Andy Robertson has had very few minutes. But you'd think he might actually come into the side for one of these two. So and Szoboszlai coming back might mean a midfielder gets to be benched, a McAllister, a Jones possibly. And although Chiesa, I don't think set the world alight, he was functional within a team that had a better attacking set of understandings the other day. So I'm not sure at all we can use him, but maybe we can trust him a little bit more here and there, at least until we've got Mohamed Salah back, say. So I'm not, as long as we don't pick up training ground injuries and we aren't unlucky with contact injuries against Leeds, I'm not as despondent as I think I was in looking at these 3 games ahead. The spread outness is not ideal now, but we've had the 2 weeks to sort of loosen up limbs a little bit more. So let's see, and maybe a little bit of rhythm will help the Ekatikes and Verses of this world as well.
Let's do Leeds. So let's imagine a bit of a team or a couple of teams, Beth. I think the manager's got a plan for all 3, and he's got to work out who he can get rest to, where and when. Rob's point on Chiesa, I think, is interesting. I wouldn't be averse to seeing Liverpool possibly only make one change for the game against Leeds, which is probably Szoboszlai and McAllister out, with a view to start McAllister then against Fulham, which could well be a rest game for Curtis Jones. Maybe keep Gakpo on the bench for Leeds, give him a bit more of a gap. Bring him back for Fulham. Maybe Wirtz and Jones look at Fulham from the bench. Liverpool do it a little bit differently. Leeds, though, you can make a bit of an argument of, there's still a decent enough gap from Saturday to Thursday. Another hour of Chiesa may be no bad thing because it did work relatively well over the course of the game. That gives you more time to get Bradley back fit, fully fit as well. He's just got to box clever, is the point here. Whatever it is he does, he's got to box clever, and where he's got options to be able to give players bits of rest. I think, again, Wolves helps to be able to imagine that he either doesn't need to rush a couple back, and maybe he can manage minutes a little bit. Yeah,
I think the fact that Gakpo, I know, is a divisive figure at the moment, but that he is coming back and is a little bit fitter than he was on Saturday is no bad thing. I actually wouldn't be averse to starting him against Leeds, and that with a view to him maybe sitting out at Fulham. It feels like there are, obviously Szoboszlai being back is a huge boost. I wouldn't be surprised if Chiesa drops to the bench and then is an option to come on for 30 minutes when Ekitike does tire, because I think he is, at this moment in time, is the most sort of glaring replacement to bring on for Ekitike. And I think he was functional on Saturday, but I think for me it consolidated that he probably is better coming on off the bench against tired legs. I think that is where we will see his most impactful performances. So I think there are more options. I think, like you say, he's got to. Managers always say, we take it one game at a time, and in a sense, Leeds are no mugs. They're on a good run at the moment. Calvert-Lewin has decided to be a footballer again. So it's not going to be an easy game by any stretch, but he does have to also keep Fulham in mind. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him make 2 or 3 changes against Leeds.
I think he's in a zone where he will be very much focused on. He's a manager who's lived on his nerves for the last 6 weeks. Really, people wanting him sacked every week. So if I was that manager, I'd go, I just want to win the next game because.
Also, the next game is, of the 3 that are following, the most winnable. So let's win the one that's the most winnable.
But having said that, there is a part of him which won't be able to resist the idea of working backwards from the Arsenal game. And what does my best team look like at Arsenal? And I know there's part of me that would say to myself, you could play your best team, they could have their best performance in 8 weeks and you still get beaten 2-3-0. You know, don't worry about it. But I think if I think about the Arsenal side, I think he's beginning to trust, well, we've discussed this at length, the Jones-Wirtz axis on the left. He goes, I want that for the time being. For the time being, that's my thing that works. And Ekitike is my obvious central option. So what am I doing on the right-hand side? I wonder, assuming both are fit and getting fitter, that with Bradley and Frimpong, he wouldn't mind looking at both on the pitch against Arsenal, because it would enable you to shore up that right-hand side with two players who can both defend and can both attack.
And give you a bit of pace as well.
Give you a bit of pace. You might see that as a bit of a win-win for that specific game, and he might work backwards. I think Szoboszlai and Gravenberch, you pick some midfield, and Curtis Jones is ahead of McAllister if he can only pick 3 at the moment. He may look at the Arsenal game and go, that's the one I want to reprise into Milan, and play 4 midfielders. Maybe he's going to work backwards.
Play 5, play Wirtz, because Wirtz doesn't start against Inter Milan and he doesn't have Isak now.
Well,
so
5
maybe,
if you count Wirtz. Sorry, yeah. Wirtz, that may be exactly what he wants to do. So it's working backwards from that, really, and deciding what's the best way home. I'm not sure. The Gakpo question is going to be fascinating now. I mean, obviously, you're right. He's divided views this season. Hasn't divided it for me. I don't want to see him starting much because I don't think he's playing very well.
As I said that, I thought I'm next to his strongest critic.
I was a critic of him when he was banging in goals left, right, and centre last season. I still found a way. But I think the manager may have joined me on the Gakpo sceptical train, in as much as I think he'll like the Jones-Wirtz axis, and also I think Gakpo. I mean, the 20 minutes I've enjoyed most from Gakpo this season, I think, was when he came on as sub at centre forward. Was it against Real Madrid or somebody like that, or Villa? He came on as centre forward in a game at Anfield, second half. He wouldn't be the worst sub for Ekitike if to protect his legs late on. So he could see Gakpo in that way, especially as he's coming back from injury. So I don't think Gakpo will start against Leeds. That's my hunch.
I feel as though it might be quite close to unchanged. I think the Kaiser point is spot on in that, but I just sort of wonder if one more placeholder thing gets you through the next thing. Leeds, though, let's be clear, good against us in the end, in the 3-3 after he changes it. Against City, 2-0 down at half-time, pull it back to 2-2. That's at City's ground. City need a late winner, Leeds the better side second half. Since then, have a look back. You know, I think that they've not been perfect, don't get me wrong. Good there against Sunderland. I watched it yesterday.
They were losing it, Sunderland, weren't they?
Well, they went 1-0 down, but it was against the run of play by the time it hits the back of the net. Right. And then they held themselves together and they were much better than Sunderland's second half.
Their goal is all but goal of the season, by the way.
It's a gorgeous goal.
From back to front, incredible.
Dominic Nathaniel Calvert-Lewin is one hell of a man. He ought to be adored as a national treasure.
Fume on the banks of the Royal Blue Mersey. Yeah. With that.
He ought to be adored as a national treasure, Cam, not least because of fume on the banks of the Royal Blue Mersey. There's a massive game that follows for them, though. They've got United at home as the one after. So they've got this intense little run. They've got a day less prep, and that matters at this time of year than the one coming up against Liverpool. They have then 12:30 at Ellen Road against Man United. I think it's important that Liverpool assert themselves early on in the game because I think that Leeds can possibly accept not being at their best for this one if it means they come strong against United.
Yeah, and and the run of form that they've had recently might help that. So, if it's the same as if we go in a half-time 2-0, you could see where Leeds say, right, let's just pack our bags and let's just get ready for United. Do you know what I mean? And they'll give us a good game, though. We've shown it the other week that they are a good side, they are handy. But I think if we can carry on how we've been building slowly but surely.
And one at home.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, normally.
It's not Ellen Road.
I know, thank God. But,
it's dark.
But I think normally it used to just be a given that at Anfield it's 3 points, but now obviously because we're in transition and stuff, it's not really the same, is it? But yeah, we are at home, so we should be going into every home game as favourites and we should be getting right behind them. But out of all of the games, it probably is on paper the easiest one. But that then means we've got to go and get a win. I
think the thing is as well that Leeds game, it's not at Ellen Road. It was Ellen Road that got them a point in that game. They were absolutely dead and buried at 2-0.
Should have been 3, really.
It should have.
Gakpo's missed late on.
It should have been 3-0. Again, Liverpool don't do that. But even at 2-0, Leeds were offering absolutely nothing, and then it takes, it goes back to that whole point about offering encouragement. And as soon as that goal went in, you just knew that what was going to happen. And I think the players knew and the crowd knew. So I think Liverpool just have to really remember that actually, we had these well beaten a couple of weeks ago, and so we just need to do that again. We're at home. We're not at Ellen Road in the dark, and just play the team in front of them rather than thinking, they gave us a really hard game. They didn't give them a hard game for 60 minutes. It was only off the back of a mistake for Liverpool that they got into that game, and that's the game that Liverpool have to play.
Okay, there's a gutter coming out for free later on today. Rob is hosting it in half an hour or so. He's going to hang on in here, get prepped, get psyched, does press-ups beforehand. It's a crazy scene, it really is. The raw meat. The raw meat that this man gets through before transfer shows.
It's a diet Ferrero Rocher, is actually.
Well, whatever it is it takes. And with this gutter, the ambassador is really spoiling us. It has been one for the teenagers. It has been the Anfield Wrap this week. I hope you've enjoyed it massively. Thank you very much to Cam. Thank you very much to Beth. Thank you very much to Rob. You for listening or watching or wherever you get your podcasts from. Transfers with Rob coming out for free later on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you later on.